Yeah, let's move on to Kathleen's selection, the title Fortson, and the writer Dawn Erickson.
Dawn Erickson, yes. And before I go into that, I just wanted to say to Emma that I so enjoyed your piece as well, and the cycles that it depicted with there was wisdom, practicality, and an incredible generosity for both the lover, but also the self. And I was struck by that. Just really just a beautiful piece.
Thank you so much. That means a lot to me.
You're welcome.
You had me at practicality. That's, I think, one of the most underrated literary qualities to have. And this is coming from somebody who quotes Henry David Thoreau on the website, so take that with a grain of salt. But yeah, it's great. I always love having kind of the contributors not only make their own selections, but then also kind of speak about each other's pieces. It's always fun to have that dynamic. So thanks for adding that, Kathleen.
You're welcome. And with Fortson, there was just so many beautiful pieces. I was making so many notes on my legal pad about different works that struck me, and many of them did. And Fortson, however, I was just taken into that scene. It was like I was just physically transported. It takes place in the Pacific Northwest, so this is an area that I am familiar with. But it wasn't just the location or the scene. I was taken emotionally into that place, into a place of considering the past. Also a little bit of a side note. I have an only child, a son. He's really old now, but he's still my kid. And when he was young, I just drugged that child all over the Pacific Northwest to have experiences and adventures. And we did. We drove all over the place, and we went to places like that and, scrambled about finding treasures, leaving them there, but finding things. And so there was a bit of nostalgia for me in reading that. But that nostalgia went back even further, because I started thinking about all of the stuff of my life, all the stuff of my family's life, the stuff of the culture's life. And what is that fascination that we all seem to have with that stuff? And I loved the one line where the son says, "I just want to be remembered." It's just so straightforward. And then she says, it's an ancient urge to be remembered. Drawings on a cave wall, handprints on a rock, the urge to collect, preserve, and save, to group and label, equally ancient. What is it about making things? I'm a maker. I make these things that, it's my expression and my response to a moment or a situation that I'm experiencing. But is this how I'm remembered? there's this thing about, thinking about legacy, thinking about, and also I start thinking about all of those left behinds, because in this story, there's this old axe that then the kids find, and they do leave it and they cover it up kind of protectively. And what is it about these left behinds that is, what is the real value of them to us? Is it that they then allow us to create stories? Stories that edify and examine our lives? How does the past live through our stories? And how does that past actually help us to appreciate the now through a recognition of what was? I don't know if I'm making any sense on this, but I'm actually in the process of looking at a lot of this stuff in my own life, downsizing, all of that. And what is it about that is so satisfying, getting, collecting this stuff, making this stuff that's so informed, and really I've built my life on it. And then the poignancy of looking at it from a vantage point and seeing it not as the thing, but as the feeling. And is that the real legacy? And can I then look at stuff and rather than coveting it, having to own it, can I cover it up with the moss, as those children did, and leave it, but take the story, take the feeling? So it was, I enjoyed the description of place. I enjoyed the story of the mother and the son, the friends, the adventure. I've walked through forests like that, woodlands like that. And then looking at what's the real heart of that piece, and why did it make me feel so emotional? It wasn't about the axe. So it gave me a lot to consider.
Well, I will admit that I read this maybe 4 or 5 hours ago, and involuntarily wrote a thesis on it because it attacked me. This one started with an advantage, immediately took me to a different place that wasn't local. So immediately that I see the moss and the old growth trees of the Pacific Northwest. So it already had kind of captured me, but I was reading this in public and I was right on the close to losing it. I almost was weeping by the end. So I have a lot to say, but Emma, you want to go first? Because I may kind of unspool. What are your first impressions, or what kind of thoughts do you have before I tear into this?
Yeah, so I really loved this piece, and I think Kathleen has some really good, profound thoughts on it. I really like the first line and just the imagery of the trees. I think that this piece has some really stunning imagery that really pulls you in rather than feeling like fluff or being distracting, because I think sometimes, especially in prose, there can be too much description or a description that doesn't really add to the piece. But in this case, it felt very meaningful, and I wasn't sitting there thinking like, oh God, when is the description gonna end? I just thought it was really beautiful. There's a lot of short, simple sentences while providing the background and the imagery, and I really like that too. You know, I'm an editor. My dad's an editor, so I tend to look at things through a very editor view. But I really like the structure of this and how it's actually written, and the symbolism of the longevity of the forest and the youth of the two boys. I think they're 8 years old. I thought that was really interesting, and how these young boys are talking about things like, I just want to be remembered, and asking all these questions about the various things in the woods. They seem very precocious and like very wise beyond their years, the young boys. And I thought the imagery of the old destroyed doll was interesting. And I like how the author, Dawn, said that it probably belonged to a child who is grown up now and gone away from here. I thought that was really fascinating to think about. So all in all, I just thought this was a really, like, it's a simple piece, but yet it's so complex at the same time. It's simple at the surface level, but once you really think about it, it's very, very complex and very, has a lot of, leaves you thinking about your own life and your own place on this earth.
Aaron, if you have some kind of a code, like you'll get a piece of paper to hold up if I go too long, because this one really attacked me. And if I get around school, it's like, all right, here's your 5-minute warning, buddy. Yeah, so this had me because it's a foreign location that I've been to. So I have some sense memory of Pacific Northwest forests. So as soon as we're in the world of the old growth trees and the moss, right there. And so I was kind of relieved immediately starting, but then it's attacking me on multiple levels, because then there's this forensic understanding of trees and how trees work. And I think trees are pretty neat. It's not like a thing that I'm obsessed with, but hearing people talk passionately about different kinds of trees. For instance, there's a specific kind of birch that one person described as the birch trees that live fast and die young, because they only live from 75 to 100 years old. Those are the trees that just like burn out quick, man. Like that feels beautiful. I talk passionately about trees in particular. Nature, sure, maybe something about trees. I'm not sure what that's hitting, but it's attacking me somewhere beneath the logical brain. Then we get into the archaeological stuff. So right now, I'm in the process of finishing moving my dad out of his house because he can't do his own stairs anymore, and I moved him in with me. So I took on the responsibility of being the family archivist, right? My parents had a profound divorce, like an angry, terrible divorce, twice. And each time, both parents wanted to throw everything out, get rid of all the pictures, get rid of all the heirlooms, anything in a frame. And, you know, brothers on this side, brothers on that side. I said, no, I feel like we should save this. Even if it's just for me, let me be the one who kind of sneaks in between the warring factions to save the family heirlooms and the little old record player and the little knickknacks, the German beer steins on both sides. And I was going to be the repository. And that felt good because, like, all right, I know this stuff will be important for me in a very short period, maybe 10 or 20 years. I'll be glad I have this stuff. I've lived long enough to know how that works. And there was a line in here. It was, what's this? It's just plain old garbage. And that one, they hooked me, right? Okay. And the following line is, but wait 50 years, and then it will officially be an archaeological valuable artifact. And I know enough about an individual life. So as the family archivist who is in charge of the old Earl Garner records and my mom's Beatles records, like, well, I'm not worried about that they're valuable, because they're not. They're broken, but they're going to be valuable. So they represent something worth keeping. There's this weird sense of responsibility, though. Now I'm the family's museum keeper. I'm the one that has to be in charge of all the artifacts. And there's practical things. How do I store them without them decomposing? Because everything, like the saw, is rusting away and decomposing in real time. And I had a little light when they buried it. Maybe it'll be there for the next several generations. And then another part of me is like, it's also going to completely rust away and oxidize, and it'll be gone in several generations unless somebody puts it in a museum, which is an Indiana Jones reference, which hits another part of my brain. Indiana Jones. There's a line in Indiana Jones, an archaeologist who says things has to be in a museum. The evil character in that movie says a line basically close to this. Here's a worthless watch. He's waving a little gold watch. He says, right now it's worth $25, but you bury it in the sand for 1,000 years, it becomes priceless. It's like, oh, hell, this is working on so many of these different levels. Then the owl hoots. Like, I'm getting into this philosophical mindset, and the punctuation of the owl actually spooked me a little. Like that moment where there's a parent and child, and my dad was great. He took me out of the woods and kind of took me on these journeys, both in nature, but also to be aware of archaeological, historical, family heirloom objects. Primed me for all that imagery. That owl spooked me. It just sliced through all the nostalgia and fun philosophical stuff. And so when we get on the other side of the owl, everything has a little bit more weight. Everything's a little bit heavier. I'm thinking about grave diggers or grave robbers and people who pilfer from archaeological sites in ancient Egypt from thousands of years ago. And we've gone on this parent-child journey. That hits me. We've gone on this archaeological journey, like human history scale, but also individual family, what it means to have heirlooms and to keep heirlooms and to try to just have some continuity in an individual family. Within a few generations, I was exhausted. I got to the end of that and I was like, I need a break. I need to go outside and take a walk. So yeah, it was beautiful. It hit me on multiple weak spots, and I love it as a result of that. And that it didn't sneak up on me because I wanted to like it based on the Pacific Northwest imagery. It won me over there, and it just beat me all the way down. And I was happy to have been crawling up the stairs by the end of it.
That's so interesting that you had that journey. I wouldn't have predicted it. Like, that's the fun thing about hearing your reaction to some of these pieces that I don't know ahead of time. Like, this is one I wouldn't have thought that it just kind of hit all those different areas, but it makes total sense. Like,
Kathleen, the parent-child thing got me immediately because, similar to Kathleen, my dad drug me all over the place into the woods and libraries and on adventures and scrambling up ravine faces. But this is a complete coincidence. When I was 9 years old, we had a kind of an old farmhouse and it had a barn. And I'm stomping around in the barn, just exploring. And I stomp on the floor and I feel something weird. And there's a samurai sword from World War II that the previous owner had scrambled back. And I discovered this artifact. And my world just opened up. I entered into a fairy tale that, based on so many of the stories he'd been telling me, Indiana Jones and stuff. And so, yeah, the idea of finding an ancient artifact, imagining a whole history that you know, physical concrete object, like that really happened. That's amazing.
Mhm.
wow. I was hoping you'd get to the Indiana Jones reference, but you did. So thank you. That confirms my expectation.
You knew I would go there.
But I didn't know the samurai sword story. Holy cow. So yeah, I love
that one's going to the kids.
I know. The literal layers of it. We're kind of like peeling, digging, and we're finding out more about you as we go through it. Yeah, I love that kind of connection, because it just, even from the beginning of this piece, we have that ability to attach to it. I think it's like the first line gets us to engage, I think. I see a flash of my son's gray t-shirt as he veers into the alders before he is swallowed by their blotchy white trucks. We get enough visual imagery to attach to, but then, like you said, okay, somebody's speaking about their son. It's probably a childhood aged son. And then we get that line of dialogue, I want something of mine in a museum today, to hear him say over his shoulder. So we get that artifact, you know, that desire to keep, desire to protect, desire to save, to preserve. So just reading those two sentences, I said, okay, no, I got to pay attention to this one, right? We got the nature, we got even arts. If it's a museum, there's kind of the artifact aspect of it. It's like, okay, this could go into good territory, I hope, and obviously it did, because it, it's in here and it's published and we're talking about it. But just from those two lines, I'm like, this could be something, just that dichotomy. But yeah, I'm glad you had all those kinds of references to it, and then adding everybody's thoughts.
I just
really
wanted
cool
to
hear.
say, that it, there were a number of pieces in the journal that filled me with emotion, and this one, it really did hit me, and I was crying. And there isn't anything particularly sad in it. I mean, nothing horrible or sad happens, really. No one gets injured, no one dies, no one, all of that. But it made me weep. And it also, I like the Indiana Jones reference as well, because this whole piece was like an archaeological dig. We start off at a top level and then we go deeper, deeper, deeper. And then we kind of come out of it a bit at the end. Those last lines, all our longing ancient as the river to be remembered, like water maybe, flowing over rock and sand, dawn until dusk and into the next day, always there and a part of the living. Like always there, but we're living and everything is so transitory, but there's also this constant as well. And the constant, I think, is because we're always being remembered, or those things are being remembered by the living. So it's always there. And it's contemporary, even though it's from the past, because of us and because of those who will come after us. And to be remembered like water, maybe flowing over rock and sand. Well, what water does, if it flows over rock and sand enough and for long enough, it reforms it, it shapes it. And then how we experience that erosion is part of our now. So I really kind of love how I went down and then I came back up in that piece.
That's so cool. Yeah, it's so great to hear everybody's take on it.